Sometimes it doesn't fit into the schedule. Sometimes it happens on beautiful sunny days when you'd rather, frankly, be outside. Sometimes it means spending time with a bunch of people you don't really know that well. So, what is it about gathering together at church? And why could it be so important? There are many answers to that question, but today we're going to look at just one of them very quickly. It's Psalm 95 in episode 6 of Cultivate. Welcome back. Here we are in episode 6. I'm so glad to be joining you again as we learn how to worship from the one we worship. And specifically in this video series, we're looking through the book of Psalms to learn some examples of different avenues, different languages that belong in our worship conversation with God. And today we're going to be looking at Psalm 95. By way of introduction, by way of sharing with you where my head's at, maybe I spent too much time driving in the last couple of days, but this is what was on my mind. I recently drove down towards Boston, and it was, frankly, a fine day. Like, there was a little bit of rain, but it wasn't that bad. Except, and if you've ever driven south on Interstate 93 through New Hampshire and into Massachusetts, you know this. You get to these points where traffic just starts to stack up. And we'd be going 65, for a while, and then all of a sudden, bang, you stop. And then maybe you crawl forward for a couple miles, and then things just take off again. You're going again, and then all of a sudden you got to stop. And, in this back and forth, I remember thinking, man, this drive would be so much easier without all these other people on the road. It would have been faster, it would have been safer, it would have been more relaxing, that's for sure. I wouldn't have been having to check all around me, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to find something redemptive or good about traffic. I'm not trying to say that you should just sit there and enjoy the ride and stuff like that. But the thought that I was having there actually does translate to how we sometimes feel generally about people. Like, things would be a lot easier if it weren't for all these people around, right? And that's especially true, let's just be honest, when it comes to worship. Because even though there are few better sounds than when a group of people are singing together to the Lord, still, the practice of regularly gathering together as a group to worship, even when it's to worship, it seems like it just causes trouble. You know what I'm talking about. Some folks like it louder. Some folks like the music older. Some folks like it when it's longer. Some folks wish it was shorter. Some don't really like to sing at all, and some probably shouldn't like to sing as much as they do. I love church. I'll go on the record here. I love church. I love gathering as a church. I love worshiping as a church. But even Jesus, who loved people more than anybody else ever has, even Jesus would go off by himself occasionally to pray, wouldn't he? And there's something to that. We do need to have time when it's just us and the Lord. But there is just as much, if not more, biblical precedent for gathering together as God's people, for embracing the traffic in worship in order to celebrate the greatness of God. Let's look at Psalm 95, and I'll show you a little bit what I'm talking about here. Come, let us shout joyfully to the Lord, shout triumphantly to the rock of our salvation. Let us enter his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout triumphantly to him in song. For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. The depths of the earth are in his hand, and the mountain peaks are his. The sea is his. He made it. His hands formed the dry land. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep under his care. It's the first 7 verses of Psalm 95. And what do we see here? If you look through the language, you see the repeated plural form. Let us. He is our God. We are his sheep. What do we see here? I want to share this simple observation. It is simple this week. the simple observation that Christians need to pull into traffic, and we need to worship together as a community. We need sometimes to go towards the crowd. And it is a simple observation, but it is so, so important because the direction of our flow, particularly as Americans, is towards independence, isn't it? It's towards individuality. It started, I think it started with Burger King Burger King telling us you could have it your own way. You are the king. You get to make all the decisions. It might have started with that, but it didn't stop there, right? Because in music, you think about the way we listen to music today. I can skip whatever songs I want. I can just listen to a few tracks or just even one track on an album and then move on to the next artist or the next album. Or in TV, I can watch a whole season of something whenever I want to, or maybe even a whole series without waiting for commercials. If I don't like what one news program is saying, I'll just switch to a different one that has news that I might like more. If I don't like the movie my family is watching, I could just pick up my phone and look at something else. Even my web browser on my computer makes recommendations about things that it thinks I will uniquely like. You think about how our preference, our individual taste has been honored to such a high degree in our everyday life. But the psalm here reminds us of a truth that is bigger than my taste. A truth that is bigger than my story. It says the Lord is a great God, and not just He is your maker, He says He is our maker. We are united in the fact that He is our shepherd. We are His sheep. So when we make that sacrifice, when we intentionally pull into traffic and worship together and rub shoulders with people, when we walk into a space that is shared and set aside, not for my purpose, not for your purpose, but for God's purpose, we're sharing a space with people, doing things that aren't exactly tailored the way I might want them, showing up at a time that might not always be convenient for me personally. When we do that, we're saying it's not my way, it's not your way, but He is our way. God is so much bigger than my experience. God is so much bigger than your story. He's so much bigger than my imagination. And the only way we can consistently keep that truth before us is when we as individuals gather together as God's people to confess it. Without that reminder, without regular, committed reminders of coming together to worship God, without that, we will follow the same pattern of the rest of the world around us when it comes to everything. We'll shrink God down, just like we have to everything else. We'll shrink Him down and customize Him until He fits into a box that is more shaped like our preference than it's shaped like anything else. I'll offer this final thought from this psalm. The Bible often draws this analogy that the followers of God are like sheep. And we read it here in Psalm 95. We are the sheep of His pasture. Now, a sheep off by itself, by the way, is not independent. A sheep off by itself is not a free thinker. It's not somebody who's hyper mature. It's not somebody who's spiritually superior. A sheep by itself is lost. And when the shepherd finds it, he brings it back to the flock. Maybe that's what He's doing to you. Find yourself time to go to God alone, but also make sure you are regularly pulling into traffic and worshiping God alongside His people. We'll see you next week.